All right, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to today's series. Okay, today we are going to be talking about cracks. Okay, cracks on building and the ones you need to take very seriously. Okay, all right, so I'm going to list different type of cracks very quickly. So number one, we have the airline cracks. Most times when you look at building, you see a very faint kind of crack on your walls, especially on your walls. Whenever you see stuffs like this, what it simply means is that this kind of crack not be a problem really. It may be caused due to the pressure on the walls, maybe through banking of the doors. Okay, it may also be caused due to excessive loading from the roof aspect of your building, from your roof. Excessive loading too can give you that small airline cracks. Okay, this one may not really be much of a problem because if you check them, they don't run all the way to the floor. They just run somewhere and they disappear along the lines. Okay, because this kind of crack does not happen all through the section, just at one part of the section. Okay, let's say you have a wall that is this thick, then you just see a crack by just a part here. It doesn't mean it's all through. Unless you see it all through to this other section, then it raises concern. Okay, so the next one I'm going to talk about is shrinkage cracks. Okay, now generally all engineering materials have elastic properties, just like even you have elastic properties. That's why you're able to withstand a lot of pressure without breaking down. Okay, one of the things that can cause this is, especially for concrete, is premature drying. Okay, when you're having concrete that has quick setting, and there is a whole lot of water in that concrete and you're casting under a very harsh weather, you come to see that after a period of time, because the concrete is a quick setting concrete and there is so much amount of water in that concrete, the water at the surface evaporates quickly, it dries off quickly. Okay, so at the cost in the process of this, there are shrinkage cracks because at that point water left the material before time, and so because water has left that material before time, you start seeing the lines, the shrinkage cracks on them. Okay, same thing happens when you look at plastic materials like your laterite, for instance. If you look at laterite materials, because of the level of plasticity in them, so when water dries off from those materials, you see shrinkage cracks all over. Okay, sometimes too I see a lot of plastering, finishing people do on building, and you see a lot of crack. That is caused by the material. That is what we call shrinkage cracks. It is caused by premature hardening, premature dryness. There is so much plasticity in that material, and the water in that material leaves that material, under a very harsh condition. You start seeing those shrinkage cracks. Okay, so this one can be a problem because when you have shrinkage cracks like that, most time it runs all through the section. Okay, it is not just at the surface. Sometimes it penetrates a whole lot, especially if you have concrete. It can penetrate a whole lot to the entire section. That is why when you're dealing with concrete of this nature and you're working under this kind of situations, let's say you're working under harsh weather, you have to control your water cement ratio. That is one. Two, you also need to use additional a preventive measure at the surface of your concrete to keep it moist for a period of time, so that the dehydration process in the cement, in the concrete, will not be rapid. It should be a little slower. Okay, so that you don't have this problem. Same thing in your plastering materials. When you're having materials that are full of plasticity, there is so much, how do I call it? Let me call it mud. Let me use a local language so you can understand. Yeah, so when there is so much of mud in it, okay, you see it over time, it cracks a whole lot. Okay, so this is one of the problems. Okay, so this is one of the cracks you need to take seriously. Okay, because it may pose a bigger problem that you may not know. Okay, this is it. As for your plastering materials, there are other things you can do, to still have a nice surface, because it doesn't look good. Somebody looking at your building and they're seeing shrinkage cracks all over. It can even make somebody afraid to enter that building, thinking your building is failing, not knowing that it's just a particular thin material you're applying as you're finishing. But because you're using material that is full of too much of plasticity, okay, then that is what is giving you those problems. All right, so the next thing I'm going to talk about is settlement cracks. And when you look at some building, just like the one I'm showing you now, when you look at some of this building, you see the wall shearing. Okay, you see there is a difference in the crack. This one settles before the other, so it shears, and you see that difference in height. You see that difference in level. Okay, this one is called settlement crack. This happens most times when your foundation settles. A particular aspect of your foundation is settling before the other. Okay, so when this happens, you see settlement cracks. It happens from your foundation. You can see on your walls. So when you look at your walls, you see they are no longer in the same alignment. This one is giving a whole lot of gap, and when it happens like that, you have a bigger gap up and a smaller gap down. Whenever this happens, know that one side of your foundation has sunk. Okay, so one side has settled while the other side is still standing. So at the bottom it's smaller, but at the top it's wider because they have sheared at that point. Okay, so this one is a problem. That is to show you that your foundation has failed at one side. At some point it may not go beyond that level. It may settle and relax, and you just need to do repairs on the cracks. Okay, but there are other situations where it may not relax. It may happen that this is just the first stage of the settlement. Maybe after 6 months, 1 year, 2, 3 years, it settles again, because whether you like it or not, water is soaking the soil. and you're also applying weight to the soil. Okay, so this is one of the things, this is one of the problems. This kind of crack needs to be repaired. So the next one I'm going to talk about now is failure crack or structural cracks. Okay, now failure crack happens in beams, happens in columns, happens in slab. What happens is whenever you're having that kind of crack, you see your beam, you see a big line, you know, sharing just like this. You see a big line sharing on your beam. You see on your slab cracks, very big cracks opening all the way to the bottom. You can put a broomstick and it passes all through. Okay, this is structural failure, structural cracks. This is to tell you that the concrete member has failed. What is holding that section together is the tension member, which is the steel. Okay, once the steel also fails, everything will go down. So at this point, the concrete has failed, so the steel is now taking care of both the compression and the tension at the same time. So this simply means that your concrete has yielded. This can also take a longer time before it finally falls. It will definitely one day get to a point where the steel can no longer stand whatever load is coming on that building, and at this point there is problem. Okay, so whenever you see structural crack, it calls for major concern, because at that point that concrete has failed. What is keeping that building is the tension material in that member. Next one I'm going to talk about is even concrete crack. Even, H-E-A-V-I-N-G. I'm going to put it here for you. Now this happens when maybe, let's say for instance, underground freezing. The soil, underground soil is freezing so hard, you know, and you're having a concrete pavement of maybe a very little thickness. Okay, so when there is so much freezing, you know, when this activity happens, you know, you see the soil seems to, you know, like move upwards. It tries to shrink, it tries to open. So at the point where this thing is happening and you're having a concrete pavement at the top layer, the concrete is going to crack. You're going to see those eave cracks on the concrete happen. Sometimes you see a concrete pavement and all of a sudden you're seeing some shear on them. It may not mean that the concrete itself failed. It may happen that the freezing condition of the soil, you know, and the movement of that soil going up and down may be the reason why you're seeing all those, you know, eave cracks on those concrete. So another thing is expansion cracks. This is why when you're having buildings up to 30 meters and above, you have to introduce an expansion joint. Okay, this was initially recommended. I think there is a review on that now, that it can be extended to 60 meters before you put an expansion joint. The fact is, concrete is an elastic material. Okay, steel is an elastic material, and when they are exposed to sun, when they are exposed to the external atmospheric condition, they seem to change. There is deformation that is happening within the materials. Okay, when steel is exposed to excess heat, it expands. Same thing happens to concrete. Okay, so there is always need to put an expansion joint at a certain length so that you give an allowance for this expansion and, you know, and the contraction. In a situation where you don't put that allowance, you will definitely see expansion cracks on the building, because the building wants to express itself. Okay, the building wants to express itself, it wants to feel free, and at the same time it is still being held together. You know, just like you, if somebody is holding you too much together, you want to expand yourself and get yourself free. Okay, the same thing happens here. So at the end of the day, you will definitely, that concrete will definitely crack because it needs freedom. These are the things you need to take very seriously. Okay, so like I've mentioned before, check all this crack. Observe in your building what type of cracks you're having. Okay, if it's a crack that is happening both ways on your wall, it calls for concern, because though nothing may happen to that building for even a long time,
but the discomfort that it will give to whoever is living there is another thing.